elevator pitch, be ready to talk about yourself. Be ready to talk about yourself. What you're interested in, what kind of careers you're interested in, why you think you might be qualified, what's your experience. We like to know, if you have any experience in the related field, and yeah, just be ready to talk about yourself.
Definitely, I would agree with all of those things that Karen just mentioned. I think a couple other things too is I'd recommend that you kind of just take a look at all of the employers that are going to attend the career fair. So that way you just have an idea of who's going to be there. You can do some extra research just to see if who you might want to talk to and if they have opportunities that you're interested in, especially that sometimes can be better than just going up to all the tables and asking like, hey, what do you do? Because I know sometimes that ends up, if you're not interested, it wastes the employer's time, it wastes your time. So definitely would recommend doing some of that research ahead of time.
Thank you both. And actually, Kian, I think that's a really good segue into my next question. We're always telling students, do your research, right? Rather than just walking up to a company and being like, so what do you do? Like knowing what they do already, right? So what sort of information do you feel like students should be researching or knowing about before coming up to a table?
Yeah, I would say just to visit the career webpage, visit the webpage, maybe the corporation webpage, and read about, their core values, what their mission statement is, maybe what they do a little bit behind the scenes, with philanthropy, something, bigger than just, this position, how the company started, right? When did it start? Who's the founder? Like, how did it become to be? I think just a quick 15 minutes is really all that you need. I always think that's something impressive when a candidate in an interview or a career fair can tell me a little bit about the company and to like, hey, yeah, I went on the website and I saw, the company was founded in 1957. Can you tell me a little bit about the founder, whatever, anything like that? I think it's great. It shows, right, that you took the time to do some research, that you care about the position and that you care, about the company. You want to stand out. So yeah, it could be quick. It could be literally like 15 minutes for you to just do some research, jot down some notes, and talk to the recruiter about it.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, I would actually agree. I don't know if I have much else to add on to that. I would agree with everything that Karen said. I think if anything, I would really just emphasize like looking at the company's values. I think sometimes that can sometimes make or break how you feel or if you want to work for a company. So I think that's really important. And also understanding sometimes some of these companies and organizations are hiring for more than one position. So if you're kind of looking at their open roles, kind of having an idea around what position you're interested in applying for and even kind of looking at that job description a little bit to kind of determine what maybe you want to put in your elevator pitch that might align with some of the keywords that's being used for the position that you're applying to as well or interest.
Yeah, I'm loving this advice. As kind of a follow-up to that, actually, you've both been approached by students at tables. Has a student ever like said something about your organization that really made them stand out to you? And if so, like what was it?
I'm trying to think. I think that some of the times that I've been most impressed with students is they'll do research and they'll name something they found that they thought was interesting about the company. And then they'll also be like, oh, also, I saw on your LinkedIn that you blah, 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 blah. And it kind of just, I don't know, they did like some research on the company that they pulled out. And it's not just the generic information you see from like the first page on the website. And then sometimes it always sends me like, oh, you did research on me too. But I think sometimes that can kind of like stand out a little bit.
Yeah, same. Like if someone like sees, my LinkedIn and it's like, hi, I've seen you've, had several positions or you've been with the company for this long, tell me why you've stayed for this long. Again, it shows that you're interested, you did a little bit more research, and that kind of makes you stand out.
Thanks, Karen and Kiana. And I know you both mentioned when I asked you earlier, like what should students do to prepare, and you mentioned elevator pitches, right? I think that's something we get asked about a lot, right? How do you even craft an elevator pitch? How long should it be? There's so many questions that come from this. So I think one of the most common ones that we've gotten from students is how long should it be, right? How long is too long? How short is too short? What's like the sweet spot for good elevator pitch for the both of you?
I think usually like 15 to 30 seconds, but really that 15 to 20 seconds is a really sweet spot. I think, especially one, you're nervous as you're giving an elevator pitch, so you're naturally talking really fast, right? And so take a minute to remind yourself to slow down. But I think really just touching on who you are, what year you're in, what's your major, what's your career interest, and then maybe throwing in that one piece of information about how what your experience is relates to the position that you're interested in. But I would say that 15 to 20-second mark is pretty decent.
Yes, agreed. Anything more than 30 is too much. If it gets to like a minute and a half, it's too much because then also you've probably given so much information and I have questions now. I have questions, I want to follow up on some things. And sometimes it could just be too much information. I would say it should be like like who you are, what experience you have, what have you studied or where have you worked or what organizations have you been a part of? And then what are your goals or what are you hoping for a career path? So yeah, anything more than 30 seconds would be too long.
Mhm. Thanks, Karen. And I think that's a really good like transition into my next question that you kind of already answered, but what do you want to hear in an elevator pitch, right? So I think you talked about it a little bit, Karen, but Kiana, if we could hear from you too.
Yeah, so definitely would echo some of the things that can well, not some of the things, but all the things Karen said about what you have. And then I think I mentioned a little bit too, but just what parts of your experience organization relates to the specific job that you're interested in. And then something that I always like too is hearing how some of your values might align with the company values, and that can be good to throw in as well.
And that's kind of where that research comes in, right? Like you saw something in your research that maybe they really value diversity, and that's something that you value too. So, things to think about as you're doing your research on the company or projects, research they're doing, maybe if it's in STEM, things to consider. All right. Now we are about halfway through, so I just want to mention to students, if you do have questions, we will have time at the end. So just put them in the Q&A for us. Now, again, as we approach the career fairs next week, we always tell students to dress to impress, right? So we'll start with, what do you suggest to students to wear to a career fair? Like, is it okay to be more casual? Should they be more formal? What sort of tips do you have for them?
I think it is okay to be casual. I wouldn't say not like too casual, but it's definitely okay. Like I don't expect someone to be in a full-on suit. When I do see students in suits, though, like I'm impressed. Like I mean, again, it shows that you took the time to think about it this morning and you wanted to make a good first impression. Dressing to impress is, I always say first impressions still matter, and that's a form of a first impression. Along with other things like a resume, application, things like that. But at a career fair, it's really nice to see, but I wouldn't say it's necessary. But you also don't want to be like in a hoodie, with like the hood over your head, and like I don't you don't want to be a little too casual, right? Even like pajamas or sweats or anything like that. I would say just like casual, like jeans, t-shirt attire. That's fine. I don't expect again for everybody to be in business professional attire.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that if you are in that business professional attire, you have a suit or something like that, that's great. But also, I've heard from students before that are kind of concerned because they don't own those things, and that's totally fine if that's the case, right? I do think that, yeah, if you go a little bit more business casual or just casual, I think if you're thinking on the spectrum of casual dress, a t-shirt and jeans and maybe Vans or sneakers is the most casual you should go. But ideally, if you can do jeans and a sweater or just jeans and a nice top, something like that, jeans and a button up, that I think works totally fine for what you're trying to do. I think something too, if you know that, especially if you're in your fourth year, you're getting ready to graduate and you know that you're trying to get this specific job with this specific company, then that knowing background on the company, you might be able to kind of dress suited to what the company's needs are. And so that might require you to maybe be a little more professionally dressed in that suit or something like that. But that might help you to kind of build out what your dress will look like.
Yeah, Yeah, I love this advice, right? It's okay to be casual. Sometimes you don't own the business attire, but not too casual, right? No hoodie on, right? You still want to look like you did kind of try, right, for the career fair. Remember, you are trying to get an internship or a job from this. Um, and so also remember to the students in the audience that this is, Karen and Kiana's perspective, but there are some industries or some recruiters who do want to see you a little bit more formal. So doing your research on what the culture is of the company too, that you will be approaching. Hi, Ricardo, welcome.
You.
Alrighty, so we've had our third panelist join us now. So actually, Ricardo, we're gonna hit the ground running with you too. But we're talking about how to dress for the upcoming career fairs. So any advice you have on like whether students should be more casual, more formal, and your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's always good to put your best foot forward. So, business casual is always a good approach. It's always kind of a best practice. Um, you know, comb your hair is always a good idea. Yeah, I think that's how I would show up.
Definitely. Thank you, Ricardo. And the career fair is kind of early, right? So even if you're just rolling out of bed, you don't want to make that impression on the recruiters, right? But moving on to our next question. What is one thing that students in the audience can do today to prepare and to stand out for next week's recruitment fairs?
Is this for the panelists?
Mhm, yeah.
Okay, so I would just say having questions prepared is always good. It shows interest in the organization, or your general interest in the work. Obviously, doing research on the organizations you're interested in, learning more about what they do is always a good idea.
Yeah, I'd kind of same thing what Ricardo said, asking questions here, like in the Q&A, right? If you want to learn more before going to the career fair, again, do some research on the company, like your top 5 companies that you want to talk to. Again, 10 minutes is really all that it takes to do some research and get a grasp on what the company does. But yeah, I think just asking questions and showing interest, it can definitely be super beneficial.
Agreed. I think for sure just being able to be prepared and have some of those questions. I know I'm always more enticed to kind of speak to students when they're engaging with me and I'm not just giving my spiel about what the role is that we're hiring for, but students are actually kind of responding and have questions prepared for me. Or even if maybe you didn't and you just happen to stumble upon the table, but you're still asking questions afterwards is really great and really, I think makes an impression for employers as well. So I'd recommend that. And then, yeah, echoing same sentiments around just kind of make sure you spend some time doing that research. Even sometimes, like I've caught students before where they're kind of standing off to the side and they pull out their phone and they Google the company really quick and take 5 minutes, do the research, and then go up to the table, right? And so that's something that you can always do as well. But would definitely recommend doing that research ahead of time.
Yes, thank you so much for, echoing, I think, what we as advisors also tell our students. Now thinking a little bit more to like application materials like resumes, right? You're always handed resumes at these career fairs. So what are some things that students should do to prepare for the career fair in terms of like the resume? Anything specific you all look for or any specific advice for that?
Start. I think the main thing is just making sure that your resume is kind of up to date, that it's organized, easy to read. I tell students all the time that recruiters on average are not looking at your resume for very long. So when you're trying to make it super small font and pack as much information in there as possible, it makes it harder and more difficult for recruiters to read, which I think defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do. And so that is something to consider. Another thing that I'll mention is that I know that we personally don't, and I've run into other employers that will just not, they won't take your physical resume and they'll just take the digital one once you submit it online. And so if that happens, don't be offended or don't think that you made a bad impression if an employer is not taking your resume. It's typically just because they won't take the paper resumes. And so that's just a pro tip that I always give. I don't want you to feel any type of way about that.
Yes, we don't take paper resumes. We actually have like a database where students can enter their information, and then I take a picture of their resume, and then it attaches it to kind of like their profile. So just be aware of that. A lot of people will be like, "No, you can keep it, keep it." I'm like, "No, I have nowhere to put this." So make sure that yeah, kind of like accountants that don't take offense to it. It's just that we don't accept them. And yeah, one page, I would say one page, chronological order, very simple, clean resume. I think it goes a long way, easy to read. But most importantly, like your information, your education, and then what your experience is in chronological order. Because if it's like all over the place. Like if it's not in chronological order, like not the most recent, and then like your most recent job is in the middle, and then your last job before that is at the bottom, like where it just doesn't make sense. Like I can't tell, where you work or what you've done and when. That can be a little bit, kind of just confusing. Again, like we only look at the resumes for like 30 seconds. So the most easiest thing to make it the most easy for recruiters to make sure that it's in chronological order.
One of the things that I suggest to folks is also adding proficiency level to your skills. A lot of times, for me, what we're looking for, um, particularly when it comes to like certain software applications that you might have experience with, adding a proficiency level is really helpful. A lot of times when we're looking at, when you're kind of measuring the job description against the resume, knowing where someone's at with their particular skill level is really helpful for me to kind of identify um, the correct or the candidacy. Um, so that would be something that I would be looking at um, on top of education requirements and experience. I would say don't be afraid to go over one page. I think anything past 2 pages is excessive. But 2 pages is usually, I'll look at a 2-page resume.
Yeah, thank you each for your advice. I think that's something we don't think about often, the digital resume, right? Because we always tell students to have their printouts, but a lot of organizations now don't take them. They take, submit it via Dropbox, or like Karen does it, taking a picture and it kind of uploads itself. So have both ready, have a digital version that you can submit, but also have a physical copy as well, because it kind of varies by organization, right? So just be prepared for whatever that may be. And as a reminder to students, if you have questions, please submit them via the Q&A. But moving on to our next question, what are some things that students should avoid doing at the career fair?
I think I'll name some of the things that I don't know, Ricardo and Karen might not name the less common things, but I think I know a lot of times I'll have students come up to the table and then they'll ask questions and then they just kind of start like looking around, or they pull out their phone, they kind of avoid eye contact. And so I would say try to avoid doing that. And I think there are sometimes where it's kind of apparent, okay, this doesn't match what your interests are, doesn't match your career goals, so you don't really want to hear anymore. So feel free to stop the employer after they go through the first sentence or two and say, thank you so much for your time. I don't know that this is exactly what I'm looking for. And then feel free to move on. So I think that is one thing that I would say too. I'll stop there, but I think that's a big thing that I've noticed a lot with students is them kind of just like looking around, losing focus, not maintaining eye contact. And then I'll pass it to Karen or Ricardo.
Yeah, I would say also like don't just visit a booth and take like the goodies. Don't like say hello and learn a little bit about the company. I wouldn't just go up and just grab a handful of pens, a handful of, notepads or candy or food, whatever, the table has. I definitely wouldn't do that. It's just, it doesn't, obviously you're not interested in the company, but it's just a little awkward and disrespectful. So I wouldn't do that. And then also kind of like what Kiana said, like if you're not interested, they tell you about the position or their company and you're not interested, it's definitely okay. You're like, okay, well, thank you for your time. And then move on, right? There's going to be so many employers there. So it's okay. Not, it's not all the same industry, the same positions. It's definitely okay to say, oh, I don't think this would be the right fit, but thank you, that's fine. Like we're both, searching, right? And we're looking for great candidates. We're looking for a great company, an industry. So if it's not a fit, it's totally okay.
I agree with all of that. I would say also too, don't be shy. We've been in your position before. We were young. I was young once. Don't be afraid to stop by and introduce yourself and ask questions again. We might have positions that you're interested for that maybe we aren't necessarily promoting, but maybe there is some interest, particularly within our organization that maybe it's not so obvious even by the organization, by what you do. But for example, like we have, we're a nonprofit, but we have positions in business development, marketing, IT. So, don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be shy.
Yes, thank you all. And I think as a follow-up that I have for each of you is what kind of questions should they be asking you? Ricardo, I know you just mentioned this. I don't know if you want to answer first.
I mean, obviously educating yourself on the organization, when you come to the booth, but, don't be afraid to ask what positions not only are, available, but like, what are the kind of like, what's the, is there a track to internship to full-time employment? Is that an option? Are there entry-level careers or entry-level positions that you can transition into? How to build relationships within the organization so that you can kind of make an impression on either the hiring manager or the hiring team. Don't don't be afraid to ask those types of questions. I love answering those questions because it really informs not only the interest level, but maybe there's probably some longevity there.
Karen or Kiana, do you have any advice on what kind of questions students should be asking?
I would agree with most of what Ricardo said. And again, just emphasizing, don't be afraid to ask questions, right? And I think, yes, ask questions about the specific position, ask questions maybe about the experience that the employer or recruiter is having that you're speaking with. I know something that I hear that comes up a lot is just kind of questions around like flexibility and then kind of working hours. Is it in office? Is it hybrid, et cetera? And so I know I've heard feedback from students that that's something that it's important to them, but they're afraid to ask. And I think those are important questions to ask because it's something that's going to impact whether you want that position or not, right? So wouldn't be afraid to ask those and would encourage you to do so.
Yeah, I would say you could also ask about like the culture of the company, right? What has been your experience with the company? Why have you again been here for, X amount of years? And what do you enjoy most about the company? So you kind of get, an inside scoop on, someone who's an actual employee of the company, how do they feel about the culture? What do they like? So you kind of get some insight.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I think to echo what each of you are saying, you have to remember that it's not just them seeing if you're the right fit for the company and internship, but also you're seeing if they're the right fit for you. It's possible that it's not, and there's something else for you, and that's totally fine. And I think students often forget that the recruiters that are there, they work there too, right? They can also speak to company culture. They can also speak to so many things about the company. And I think often that's kind of forgotten. So I think that's a really good reminder that each of you gave. And to our last question or my last question before I move on to the Q&A from students, has a student ever done something that felt like they gave you an immediate negative impression of them? If so, what was it? So our students can avoid it.
I would say it's just that when they go to the table and just grab stuff, that's a bad first impression. Or when you come up to the table and you're not prepared, and Kiana kind of mentioned earlier, and they say like, "What is this?" I'm like, "What's what?" Like, what's the company? What's the position? What do you mean? So that's kind of a weird way to start it if you don't know. About the company, you can, it literally is, hi, my name is Karen. I'm a senior, I'm a junior, I'm a sophomore. Can you tell me a little bit about your company? I've never heard of you guys before, or I'm a little bit familiar, but I don't know what you do or maybe what you're hiring for. Can you tell me a little bit about it? And that's it. But again, when students come up and just say like, what is it? What is this? And sometimes don't even say hello, that's a really bad first impression.
I would agree with that. I would say also having a genuine interest in either the work or the organization with that preparedness. Or not, it's not just a box to check on your resume. Oh, I did this internship. Like actually being invested and interested in the work that we're doing as an organization. Hiring managers, recruiters, we can tell when that when we get a sense that someone's just doing it because they know that they have to, or it's part of their curriculum, or but so having that genuine, authentic interest in the work is really important. I would say there's no easier way to have yourself, disqualified from candidacy is even when you're having conversations with the hiring team or the recruiter. We could see right through it.
Definitely can agree with both things that Ricardo and Karen said. I think a couple other things I would add on to that is, in addition to the what is this that students sometimes come up to the table and ask, I've also heard a number of times, what are you going to do for me? And so I think that can also be a really negative impression. And so I'm seeing Ricardo and Karen's face. So I'm guessing maybe you haven't had this before, but I've had it at multiple schools in the past. And so I think that that definitely is always something where I'm like, I don't really want to tell you what I do. I will, but I think that's not something that you don't want to say. And I think in addition to that, I would say sometimes folks have a really negative reaction to what the salary is if you're asking that, or maybe if it's shared or posted in one of something, a flyer or something that may be on the table. And so I think that it's okay if salaries don't match your expectations, right? Now, there's definitely been time in my past where I hear a salary and I'm like, oh no, no way. That's not what I'm looking for. But I think how you respond to that is really important as well. And so that is something I would take into consideration.
Yeah, thank you, each of you. So we do have some questions from our students. To make this a little bit broader, how should freshmen who maybe have, less experience approach a career fair?
I know it can be a little more difficult for first years because you may not have that experience. I think it's great that you're getting a head start and going to the career fairs to kind of find out what's out there as you're looking for internships and things. Then I think one thing is all experience is experience. And so maybe you don't have work or internship experience, but if you have volunteer experience, if you were maybe captain of your football team for 3 years in high school, right? All of that can kind of lead into valuable experience that can translate to an employer. And so that is something that I would kind of keep in mind as you approach and you're talking through what your experience is, being able to share things like that.
I totally agree with Kiana. I think a resume that has intention, experience with volunteering, even if you have no work experience, to me says a lot about you. It says that you have goals, you have interests, and that you're taking your you're not only your education but your career goals very seriously. And so I always encourage young folks to volunteer. There's a lot of organizations in LA who do offer those opportunities, and there's a lot of areas of interest there too. So highly encourage that. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I echo everything that they said. They kind of covered it. Yeah, any kind of volunteer work, you got involved at, church, or you are part of a club organization, anything, even you did, part of a team, a club, anything like that, you can definitely add on to that. It shows leadership. It shows that you got involved, in something outside of just, school. So yeah, anything like that you did just on the weekends or in high school or whatnot, you can definitely add that.
Thank you, each of you. And as a follow-up to what I think Kiana had mentioned about salary, how do you respond to, if a recruiter asks about your salary expectations? And does it give a bad impression if they give their salary expectations?
I don't think it gives a bad I mean, I think in all internships should be paid, to be honest with you. I think students, not only you're having to consider the cost of your education and maybe you're working part-time and, an internship is your time. And I think you know, you should be paid for it. I think internship programs don't always have the biggest budgets in terms of, hourly pay. So we want to make sure that you're compensated. For us, particularly at my organization, we do a stipend. Or it could, it's usually paid out bi-weekly. But some compensation I think is appropriate and acceptable. It's not, unfortunately, it's not always an area where we can negotiate. Those are usually set by budgets that usually are out of our control as recruiters or even within talent acquisition. So I think you want to be flexible when it comes to comp.
Thank you, Ricardo. I think that's a really good way to put it. And again, as a follow-up to our other question about students with less experience, the earlier example was a freshman, but what about students who maybe they're juniors or seniors and they've really been primarily focused on their coursework? How can they approach standing out at career fairs if they have, less experience, less work experience?
I would say like if you did a lot of coursework, like talk about the projects that you did in those classes. Again, you could show teamwork, a lot of transferable skills like communication, teamwork, leadership. So talk about the courses, talk about the projects you did, especially in a team environment. We want to know how you work with a team. So I would definitely talk about that.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think, yeah, mainly everything you do is going to have some form of transferable skills. So figure out how you can translate those skills into what might be relevant for an employer, right? And again, I know a lot of times you're still, even if you're focused on your coursework, you're still participating in some form of a club or something like that. And again, that's all relevant experience that you can bring in to your experience. I know I was speaking with someone yesterday who hasn't had a job previously and they've just been really focused on their school. They're in their last year, but they're president of their major has a specific club. And so I was like, great, that's great leadership experience. Tell me more about that because that can really translate. And so really just keeping in mind all of the little things that you do. Or I
Yeah,
shouldn't say little because they're not little, but all of the things that you might feel don't matter probably do.
yes, thank you, Kiana and Karen. I think you both put it really well. I think our students forget you're doing amazing work in your classes too. And you can always talk about your projects and how your projects are relevant to the positions you're applying for, the positions you're interested in. And this could be something you bring up at career fairs too. And in thinking a little bit more about like when they're actually in the internships, what advice do you have for students to make the best of the internship, right? And thinking about like possibly then having a full-time role after, right? So what advice do you have for students to make the most of the internship?
Like you would with any job, show up on time, be presentable, do the work, check in with your direct manager. Don't be afraid. I'm not saying don't be afraid to ask for extra work, but see where there's areas that maybe you have interests within the scope of your work that you are interested in. Let people know that you are interested in those things. Don't be afraid to ask for other opportunities that maybe not be a part of your actual like description of work. If there's, and that's the cool thing about internships is a lot of times it gives you visibility not only into a specific department, but maybe there's other areas within the organization that you didn't know existed that you are interested in. Have conversations with people in the organization about that. Don't be afraid to, again, ask questions, put yourself out there and do good work.
Yana or Karen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say if there's also like a project that you have to do or a roadmap that you have to complete by the end, to make sure that you're on track with completing it, that you're submitting, any assignments on time, that you're fully participating, in that project or presentation that you have to complete at the end. But a lot of what Ricardo said, yeah, show up on time, be punctual, show that you're interested in the position, right? They hired you, whether it's temporary, paid, unpaid, they chose you. Hopefully that could lead to a full-time position once you graduate, because a lot of the times, at least for us, when we bring an intern on board, we see it as a recruiting opportunity. We put a lot of time, effort, training into our interns. So once you're there, you want to show, and of course, if it's mutual for everybody, if it's performance-based, make sure that you're performing, you're doing the work, because then that could lead to a full-time employment or to an offer.
Totally agree. I've seen a lot of conversion from internships to full-time employment. I've seen it happen a lot, and it usually works out.
Yeah, thank you, each of you. I think you're echoing a lot of what the advisors say, so I'm glad to hear we're telling our students the right things, right? So as we kind of like wind down from our panel, I want to give our panelists each a chance to kind of talk about where we can see you next. If not the career fair, then any events, and then what sort of opportunities you're all hiring for. And a reminder to kind of mention your organization as well.
I'll go first. Well, I'm Karen. I'm a talent acquisition specialist, and I work for Enterprise Mobility. Most people know us for Enterprise Rent a Car. And I will be next week. I'll be February 5th, which is Wednesday. I'll be at the DEI Recruiting Expo, and then the following day, on the 6th, I'll be at the Spring Career Fair. So a bit both. And currently, I'm hiring for our spring internship. Starts in March. For seniors, we recruit specifically only seniors. We accept all majors, but it is a sales, customer service, operations position. So definitely have to have an interest in that. And then we also are hiring for our full-time management trainee position. That's our entry-level position with a career path into management or different positions within our company. Enterprise strictly promotes from within in our operations, and everyone starts off in this position. So definitely offers a very rewarding career path.
Happy to jump in next. So again, my name is Kiana, and so I work for a nonprofit called City Year, and so we really specialize to kind of provide some additional adult support resources into systemically under-resourced schools. And so you'll find me at the career fair on the spring career fair on February 6th. And then in terms of kind of what we're looking for, so we're hiring for the student success coach role. Is the title essentially being in a school full-time supporting students on campus? And so we accept all majors as well. And then we typically will hire folks that are in their last year and getting ready to graduate in the spring, since they'll be full-time on campus as of July or August. But we have had folks that have applied in their first, second, or third year and somehow find a way to make it work with their schedule. So we're not opposed to that, but most often we find that it's usually our upcoming graduating seniors that are most applicable for the role.
Ricardo Zepeda, but the organization I work for is called Para los Niños, for the children. And so the next event I believe we have is a Handshake Virtual Education Info session with y'all, and from 3 to 4. So my team, we have folks on the team who will be present for that. The roles that we typically hire for internships vary. We are educational and student community service organization, so a lot of the roles are oriented around education, mental health, youth workforce services, so providing guidance to young folks who want to complete their high school education or move into higher education. But essentially all sorts of roles related to that. Internships are primarily focused on mental health. So we do hire or have relationships with a variety of programs, not only with mental health, but I believe we have a couple other ones supporting our youth workforce services program too. And I'm happy to circle back with Elizabeth on what those opportunities are to share with you all.
Thank you to each of our panelists for joining us today. Thank you about your information and insights that you shared were very valuable to our students. And then I just want to remind our students that we will be having the Career Fest will continue on this week. We have a lot of programs going on, so check out everything on Handshake. And then our career fair is next week on February 6th, the DEI Recruiting Expo on the 5th. I hope to see you all there, and hopefully with the tips provided today by Karen, Kiana, and Ricardo, you're going to be super prepared. But thank you all for joining us.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.